some history. So for all of you history buffs out there, I would like to welcome Christian McBurney. He's the primary editor of a book, and you might recognize him from one of his 7 books that he's written, along with his blog, which is pretty cool as well. What's a
Small State Big History?
Small State Big History. That's right. I have it. I was looking at it all last night. Super fun, super cool. So your latest book, you have in your hand with you, World War II, Rhode Island. It's beautiful, has amazing pictures in it. Your latest one of 7 that you've written. And you're actually not working in the field of history, but you are kind of a historian. This is what you do, even though it's not technically what you do.
It is my passion. I'm a lawyer in Washington, D.C., actually. My passion is writing history, Revolutionary War history, and Rhode Island history.
Which is incredible. So you're from Rhode Island, you went to Brown, but you just work in DC in your home. Talking about the book, you've done a couple lectures on this, and you're happily sharing with us today. So thank you so much for joining us in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So welcome home as well. Talk to me just a little bit about what went into this book.
Well, it was a collaboration of 5 authors, so it was terrific. That was a good part of it. Brian Wallen did several chapters. Pat Conley, the Dean of Rhode Island Historians, did a chapter. John W. Kennedy at the Naval War College Museum in Newport did a chapter. And Maureen Taylor of Providence did a chapter. And it was a real labor of love. We really enjoyed it.
Kind of fun to be able to work with so many experts, besides yourself being an expert, kind of collaborating to pull different topics together to put something like this. Tell me a little bit about Rhode Island's involvement in World War II. You were saying that for such a little state with such a small population, we made a big impact on the war effort.
No question. A small state, but a big history. Incredible things were going on in Rhode Island during the war. Mostly due to the Navy facilities. It was the best harbor in the Northeast. You had most of the country's torpedoes were made in Newport, so used for submarines, destroyers, PT boats, airplanes, and they were tested in Narragansett Bay. Sometimes they went astray on people's lawns, but it was a key part. We have some great pictures of some stray torpedoes.
That's so cool.
500,000 sailors were trained at Newport Naval Training Center. That's a huge number.
500,000.
Enlisted sailors and officers. At Quonset Point, you had the largest naval base air station in the Northeast, basically protecting New York and Boston. And also, you had the Advanced Base Depot, which was sending hundreds of thousands of tons of equipment and supplies all over to Navy bases all over the world. And of course, you had the Seabees, the construction battalions. 100,000 were trained in Davisville. And you had the PT Boat Training Center. 13,000 were trained there.
So when it comes down to these numbers, I mean, these are big numbers when we're talking about Rhode Island and Rhode Islanders. When you're looking at that versus maybe other states and their impact on the war, does it seem large? Does it seem like a big impact?
To be honest, I don't think there are many states in the country that could match it, even though Rhode Island is so small. I've only scraped the surface. We also had 3 POW camps here. Did you know that there were German POW camps here?
Not until I read your notes that you sent me.
Top secret ones, too. They were actually of anti-Nazis, and their main goal was to publish a newspaper to distribute to 380,000 POWs across the country, trying to teach them democracy and how to promote freedom and liberty and dignity in post-war Germany.
Wow. Okay, so there were 3 POW camps here. Where, if we were cruising around now, where were those? Do we know that information?
Sure. Fort Kearney, back then known as Fort Connie, is now the Narragansett Bay campus at URI. Brian Wallen and I had a lecture there yesterday. And Fort Getty and Fort Wetherall in Jamestown were the other 2 locations.
So how many people were kept there? Do we know that?
Not too many at Fort Kearney. They had about 110, but then they would cycle some through. About 1,300 to 1,400 went through Fort Getty and Fort Wetherall, training them to be administrators and policemen in post-war Germany.
Wow, that's fascinating. And is that, I mean, is that common knowledge? Is that
Well,
something that
it was-
Rhode Islanders shared?
No, very
Americans shared?
few, very few people knew it, and actually during the war it was top secret.
Yeah.
Although we did find a few people who lived locally, and one boy remembered going up to the fence and talking to the Germans and trading cigarettes for chocolates, and but he got yelled at by the guards. And another used to go in and watch movies with the German prisoners. So he knew they were there.
Wow, you used to go watch. I mean, that's just incredible. And then to know and be able to visit these locations, right? Because we go and go visit Fort Wetherall. I mean, it's a beautiful location that you can go and walk around in, and now to be able to picture that, because it's always fun to go see these places and say, oh, I wonder what it was like back then, but then to be able to picture, like,
Sure, even at Narragansett Bay campus, beautiful spot overlooking Jamestown, the West Passage. There are former bunkers, outlook bunkers, bomb bunkers, huge gun emplacements for 6-inch guns. One interesting thing that we found out was in Narragansett and at Secana Point in Tiverton, there were these huge 16-inch guns that were placed during World War II. They weighed 400,000 pounds each, and they had shells that were as tall as me, and when they were fired, they broke a lot of windows in the neighborhood.
which probably didn't make people so happy.
No. But that was part of the sacrifice during the war.
Yeah, no kidding. Let's talk about some other sacrifices, because, I mean, people were all part of the war effort, and you learned a lot. Or what did you learn about people's efforts who maybe weren't enlisted? What did you learn about Rhode Islanders' impact and what people gave and what people did in Rhode Island?
Rhode Islanders contributed in many ways, and they put all their differences behind them. There were differences of class, gender. A lot of women were discriminated against. African Americans were very much discriminated against in the workforce. But President Roosevelt said we have to put all that behind us, and everyone has to work for the common good, and they did. Everyone worked to bring their soldiers home as fast as possible. Some of the women workers who worked at shipyards, for example, said there was great camaraderie with the more experienced men. They really helped them out. They were father figures. It was a lot of good feeling back then.
So it kind of gives me goosebumps to know, because you learn about all this stuff, when you're going through school and you're learning about history, but then to put it in perspective that it was all happening right here, that war effort.
And it was also more than just the Navy facilities. There were private industry. The Providence Shipyard employed more than 23,000 workers to make 11 Liberty ships, other huge, massive cargo ships. There were shipbuilding operations around the bay in Wickford, East Greenwich, Bristol, built 100 ships, Warren.
Wow.
They were, of course, factories were incredible. Brown & Sharp employed 11,000, converting its machine tool industry to war supplies. And, for example, Imperial Knife, we have a great picture in the book. Before the war, they made knives and forks, and after the war, suddenly you see a picture of women making bayonets. But that's the way it was back then.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what you learned about women in the war effort, because it's cool. We had Rosie the Riveters right here in Rhode Island.
That's right. It really was the case. There was a need for women workers. A lot of the men enlisted in the Army, in the Navy, in the Coast Guard, in the Merchant Marine. And there was a need to fill their places in these factories, which were very important to the war effort, these factories, and shipbuilding operations. And I have some great quotes from some women who learned to be welders. They learned to make precision instruments. One woman said she could feel the gauge in her hands and get it just as right as if it was electronically done. And welders earned a big wage back then, $1.28. That was big money for them. And,
which is probably pretty exciting from not working. A lot of women probably didn't work, so to make that was probably a huge deal.
Right, and a lot of them were wives of servicemen who were serving overseas, so they really wanted to help the war effort. And the wages for women and African Americans really increased during the war.
Wow. Talk to me about the Liberty ships, because you mentioned this, and Rhode Island had a huge impact.
Yeah, it was a massive operation. You can imagine 23,000 employees at one location, Providence Shipyard.
So is that just right in along the bay, kind of where all the industrial area is now? I was
Yes,
trying to
yes.
picture, where it was located. My husband was
Steel
saying,
plant.
"Oh, his grandpa worked there,"
Yeah.
and so I'm sure a lot of people thinking back, like, "Oh, I remember hearing stories about either my dad or
Well,
my mom, maybe, right?"
Yeah, you can do a Google search and you find obituaries where some of the employees mentioned they worked at Walsh-Kaiser Shipyard,
Yeah.
Robin Shipyard. It was important to them.
Yeah, it was part of their lives, especially that war effort. That was essentially them, right?
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about what kind of surprised you. I mean, this is what you do. This is what you care about. You said it was your passion. Anything that surprised you when you were researching and writing this book?
Well, other than the German POW camps, actually our most read article on the Small State Big History website is on the German POW camp. I'd say the thing that most surprised me were the crashes, the pilots at Quonset Point. These guys, back in 1940, hardly anyone had been in airplanes, never mind flown.
That's true, right?
And suddenly they're asked to learn how to fly on the fly, so to speak. And in airplanes that didn't have a lot of safety equipment.
Yeah.
The weather was difficult around here, and a lot of pilots died in crashes. For example, in Charleston in particular, there was a very important night fighter training segment there, and the Japanese were very adept at flying at night and attacking U.S. ships. The U.S. had to respond, and Charleston was the main night fighter training unit on the East Coast. But it was dangerous. They were using radar that had never been used before. It was developed in Jamestown, Spray Cliff Observatory.
The radar was developed in Jamestown?
Yes, that's right. Very little known fact. That's another surprise.
That's so cool.
Yeah, but it was dangerous, and 44 flyers at Charleston died. And at Quonset Point, I think more than 100 died.
Wow,
There was
that's
one
really
instance
sad.
of a plane crashing in a house and killed a man's entire family when he was in Coventry while he was at work. So there were sacrifices here in Rhode Island too.
Oh my goodness, that's so sad.
Yes, yeah.
And that's all just trying to get to in the war effort.
Right.
At home.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's a very underreported aspect of the war, accidents, and not only here but on the front, just flying around and having accidents. As a matter of fact, we had one woman. Another fun aspect of this was interviewing survivors from the war, people who worked in the factories. And one woman I interviewed, Betty Sheldon, 94 years old.
Oh, that's so neat.
She befriended officers at the German POW camp, Fort Kearney, and she also became a fiancée with a Quonset Point flyer. And there's some great pictures of them having fun. He gave her a beautiful leather jacket, but he went off to war and flew a PBM Mariner, and unfortunately. During the celebration of the war's end, she got a phone call and was told that he had died in a plane crash.
Oh, it makes me so sad.
Yeah, it's very sad. And she still kept the leather jacket all these years.
Oh. Do you have a picture of her?
I do.
Is it in the book?
It is.
Okay,
Actually, no.
I want to see it.
Actually, it's on the website. There's a whole article just devoted to her.
Just devoted to her. Okay, well, I'll have to
And
look it up.
and it has the leather jacket and the note that Jim Bistodeau, the pilot, wrote to her when he gave her the jacket. So very touching.
Ugh. Did she get married again? Did she
She
have a
did.
family?
She did.
Okay,
She
so
didn't turn into a nut.
okay. Well, I don't know. They're touching stories.
There's so
and
many touching stories in World War II. They're very personal. Each one is important and personal.
in such a generation that we might not get to hang on to for much longer, right?
And they didn't talk about it that much.
No.
I've talked to a number of children of veterans, and they complain, my parents never talked to me, my father never talked to me, my mother. And one funny story is Jack DiPietro, his son was the best friend of my brother when I grew up in Kingston. When we were growing up, he was very gruff, I hardly talked to him. But then, as we were doing the book, my brother said, hey, you got to call Jack DiPietro. He's 92 years old. I couldn't get him off the phone.
Really?
More than an
Oh,
hour.
that's
He
great.
was going through it. It was fun.
He finally decided, okay, it's time.
Yeah.
And you hear that a lot from people that is just a generation that didn't open up about that kind of thing, whether it was too difficult to or that's just not what they did, right?
And they felt maybe it was their duty and they didn't do anything special, but I don't think that's accurate.
We're all very appreciative that they did, right? We might not be here today.
That's right.
Might not be getting to celebrate the 4th of July in the manner that we are. So I do want to ask you, you had sent me kind of a trivia question that I was putting together and racking my brain over last night. So why don't you set it up, and then I'm going to give my best educated guess.
Just to show how important Rhode Island was during the war, can you out there, you can play along too,
Okay.
can you name the 5 current and future presidents who were in Rhode Island during World War II? Of course, World War II started in 1939, ended in 1945.
Okay, so and it's all U.S. presidents, right? Because
Yes.
that's what I was. Okay, so my guess is, my husband and I were going over this last night, and we're trying. Our best educated guesses were, without using Google, we said
Just name one at a time. So.
Roosevelt.
Yes, Franklin Roosevelt was the president during World War II. He visited Newport in 1940. Great picture of him in the book. All the cadets in their Navy whites in the background.
That's awesome.
And that's him right here, so, in Newport.
Looking sharp.
Yes,
In Newport?
yes.
Okay, then we guessed Eisenhower.
No.
No?
No, it came after the war.
Oh, shoot. But he has the Eisenhower house, so
Yes,
that's
yeah.
a pretty
That
good
was after
educated
the-
guess, though,
that
right?
was- well, he was Army, not Navy, so I'm
Mm.
not gonna say that was a good educated guess. So.
All right. Truman.
Yes, I found out that he visited Providence once in 1944. What was going on in 1944 was the presidential campaign. He was up for being elected vice president for the first time, and FDR was being up for president, of course, for the last time. And he and Governor McGrath went to the Providence Shipyard to visit the workers there.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, then Kennedy.
Yes, John Kennedy was he got his PT boat training here in Melville, in Portsmouth. Very important part of his career. When his destroyer got cut in half during World War II, it really propelled him to the national consciousness, and he really used it to great effect in all of his campaigns, including his presidential campaign.
And Bush.
George Bush. When he turned 18, he was the youngest enlisted pilot in the Navy. And his last training was at Charleston, down in southern Rhode Island, where they specialize also in aircraft carrier training. And I have a nice letter from his to his fiancee, Barbara, at the time. And unfortunately, and he also had a very adventurous time. His plane crashed after he completed his mission. And unfortunately, one of his radio man on the airplane was a gentleman from Providence who passed away at that time.
Oh, gosh.
But fortunately, George Bush survived and became president.
And we have him as president, or not as today, but we had him as president. So those were my 5 educated
One
guesses,
more.
and I can't
Richard
think.
Nixon.
Oh, and Nixon came.
Yes.
Oh, cool. Okay.
He was a
I did not know
lieutenant
that.
in the Junior Reserve, Navy Reserve, and along with thousands of others, took a course at Quonset Point and indoctrination to be a good officer. He was assigned to Iowa, a desk job, very safe, but to his credit, he said he wanted to be in the front line, and he got a posting on a Pacific island and did creditable work there.
All right.
That's 5 presidents.
5 presidents.
How many states can say that?
I don't think many. I don't think many. I would guess probably Massachusetts and Maryland probably had a few visitors, but
Yeah.
maybe not 5.
Yeah. I don't know if George made it down there, during the war.
Yeah, exactly. How did I do? I mean, 4 for 5, that's not
very
bad,
good.
right?
That's very good.
Not bad.
Congratulations. I know you have a history background and your husband's interested in history.
He is. So we teamed up, team forces. So thank you so much. The book is World War II, Rhode Island. Where can people get it?
Well, I love to support independent bookstores here in Providence, Books on the Square. There's Barrington Books, Island Books in Portsmouth, Newport History Society gift shop and Brick Market in Newport. Wakefield Books is my bookseller. They sold 80 books already.
Already? People are geared up for this.
I know,
We
it's
love history
incredible.
here.
So, yeah.
About always good to get a little history lesson and
And if I could just put in one plug for my website,
Go for
Rhode
it.
Island History blog. I think it's the top one in the state. It's www.smallstatebighistory.com, and we have more than 20 contributing authors contributing
cool.
a story a week. The last 5 we've had relate to World War II, and one I've written this week, a very emotional involving a Holocaust victim
Oh,
who
wow.
restarted her life very successfully in Richmond, Rhode Island.
Oh, that's great. So then we can check in with you there, and then look forward to the next book whenever that comes out as well.
Thank you.
Because I know you're going to keep on doing this, right?
You're right, Molly.
I like it. Before you go, let's take a picture.
Thank you.